welcome my friends and viewers. I've been kind of wanting to expand my video format out to cover other subjects besides just, D&D and other games, and figured this would be a cool experimental way to do it separate from the main channel. With that in mind, today we're actually going to be taking a look at The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang, a semi-modern and epic fantasy war story set in Wang's Theonites universe, which is heavily inspired by Eastern culture, history, and myth. We'll be going over my impressions before reading, a quick spoiler-free review, a deeper dive that does include spoilers and covers my positives and negatives with the book, before finally landing at an overall rating. With all that said, let's get started. When I first saw and heard of Sword of Kaigen, I actually believed that it was going to be a Eastern-inspired traditional fantasy in line with things such as Moribito, Samurai Champloo, and Avatar: The Last Airbender. It is listed as an epic fantasy, and all of the covers depict characters wielding katanas and traditional kimonos, which to me screams more feudal Japan-era fantasy with elemental magic. But with that said, there were many things that actually surprised me with the direction that the book had gone in, both good and bad. The characterization of M.L. Wang's protagonists and the side characters was done very, very well, and they clearly put a lot of thought into the world building of Kaigen, Ranga, and the many other areas within the setting. This book is definitely a lot more darker than I had previously anticipated, and thus I got hit with a bit of whiplash when the war crimes and the chaos began to unfold over the course of the story. That said, I was actually able to power through it and enjoy the development that came out of it, although the ending did feel a little bit out of place in regards to being involved with the story's main plot. That's as far as I'm going to go into it for the spoiler-free part of this video, but with that in mind, I do recommend checking out this book. Its character exploration and world building are very much top-notch. It covers the terrors and horrors of war very, very well, but do be prepared for the darkness of the book because it's not kidding when it says that it's a war story. If you want my final rating, please check the timestamp listed below, and we'll move into more spoiler-heavy territory with a in-depth review. With that out of the way, this book was really a wild fucking ride. Mostly because the synopsis, the cover, and such all sort of led me to believe that this was a medieval, feudal period fantasy, only to realize that this is a setting that's actually close to modern day with planes, plastic, cell towers, phones, and so on. That for me was a little bit jarring, but it does set up the premise of modernity versus ancient cultural beliefs so well that I forgave it by the time that I got past the first few chapters. Kaigen's magic system and intricacies and the use of powers such as the Whispering Blade or the Matsuda Dragon are all things that I personally love to see in fantasy, showing how people can take their base powers and use them in very creative ways, from freezing people to floors to shutting doors or even throwing spears made out of ice. The attachment of magic to the culture of Kaigen was also very interesting to read, as they view their powers as coming from the gods that they worship, rather than it just being a tool that they use to cast spells and do cool shit like in other fantasy novels. The fact that they can do ice magic is very important to them, and it felt like a very excellent emulation of the themes of Avatar, where bending informed the culture rather than just being a baseline magical power that anybody could use. And then there were the characters. Matsuda Misaki was so damn good, showing that she had a warrior's heart, but swallowed it down in order to do right by her family and stay within cultural norms of marrying someone that her father had selected for her. If she followed her heart, she would have ended up staying with her first love, Robin, and pursued a vigilante lifestyle. But instead she put that behind her and keeping with her father and family's graces, which is kind of reflective of how we often push away our true selves and give up what we really want in the hopes of earning the approval of our parents or somebody else, or out of fear of being rejected, shamed, and isolated. Misaki's transition from housewife to old warrior was very wonderful to see. I love characters that appear meek and kind but are revealed to be secretly badass. I also really liked how they showed that because she was no longer in her limber youth, that she struggled with things such as getting up or performing the old acrobatic feats that she did when she was younger. It helps add a level of realism and vulnerability to the character. In contrast, Momoru's characterization as a boy learning that the government lies and uses propaganda was very well done in my eyes. Showing his transition from denial to anger to questioning to eventual acceptance were all very good, as well as the perspective of a child being forced to fight in a war. He touched on ideas of honor, using one's power in one's own way, and the tragedy that does come with young souls fighting in battle and possibly never making it home. His death and the expert use of third-person omniscient writing to herald it really struck a chord with me. And then there was Takeru, whose arc was honestly the most frustrating for me because I wanted him to care more about what was happening, but that was ultimately the point of his character and his arc. He was depicted as the traditional stoic patriarch shackled to the values and expectations of his family and his culture, never really able to explore or express his own emotions due to his father's abuse and succumbing to his older brother's wishes. This transitioned to him being unable to express any affection for his children or his wife, until the loss of one forces him to reconcile with that fact. I also loved the marriage counseling sword fight, which is an amazing scene that was both subversive and well earned. The side characters also felt very distinct and important, not just to the reader, but to the economy and community of Kaigen's village of Takayubi as well, which made it hurt all the more when they were killed, wounded, or suffered great trauma. Lastly, there was a way that Emma Wang positioned and explained each of the battles and the enemy's placements to us that I very much liked. Grunt flunky soldiers were depicted in yellow, and elite soldiers wore black. And while Kaigen's forces were all men, Ranga's forces were formed up of both men and women. And Ranga's attack force was actually made up entirely of volunteers who all wished to avenge their ancestors that were slain in previous wars by the Kaigenese. Not only did all of this help paint a clear picture of the enemies and allies, but also touched on the near mythical belief of avenging one's family even decades after the conflict that took their life. Almost evocative of Hannibal's father making his son make a blood oath promise to never be a friend to Rome, with generational promises of vengeance that cause constant tragedy upon both civilians and the object of their revenge, who have long since moved on past those doings. The juxtaposition between old cultural values and modern life was also explored very, very well. From Misaki's role as a housewife versus her wish for combat and violence against criminals, to Takeru essentially being an accountant, but also being weighed down by the expectations of his family's formerly warrior line. It showed how both modernity and ancient practices often are so starkly different that they do not mesh well with one another. The exploration and the use of misinformation and propaganda via Kaigen's emperor and the imperial government are both very, very relevant in today's political climate, and I felt that showing a young mind like Mamoru learning to think for himself and begin to question authority and the validity of information is an important message for young people to learn. Now, in terms of issues I had with the book, the modern inclusion of technology and such is not implied through the synopsis, which could make its sudden appearance very jarring at times. The levels of darkness and harsh themes that the book deals with are also not very well explained in the synopsis, so that was also a bit jarring for me to get into as well. I get that it's a war story, but there's a difference between watching vigilantes fight criminals like in Misaki's backstory, versus actual war crimes like murdering and assaulting civilians, which does happen in this story. I definitely would have preferred if there was a content warning or something at the beginning of the book to let us know that. Constantly referring to the glossary for terms and identifications also sometimes confused me a lot, so I believe that Sword of Kaigen may have suffered a bit from trying to be too original. But at the same time, that does add to the book's ability to stand apart from other books. You have to do work to understand this world and the things related to its culture, which thus can force you to have a little bit more buy-in than you normally would have. Lastly, I took issue with the ending and the reappearance of Misaki's old love interest in the last few chapters. I understand that it was meant to show how they had both changed over the course of their character arcs, had kids of their own, and how Misaki realized that she wouldn't have truly been happy with Robin if she stayed, especially now that she has lost a lot of her fighting prowess and has had kids that she now has to protect. But for me, it felt a little bit out of place, especially with the inclusion of this new overarching threat that Robin is dealing with, which no doubt was meant to lead to a second or future book. With that said, I do appreciate how it was done to help Takeru sort of come to an understanding of Misaki's past, acknowledging its importance, and that without it, their family may have very well perished during the attack against Kaigen. With all that said, I would ultimately give the Sword of Kaigen a 4 out of 5 stars. The characters and world building are fantastic, although the writing can be a little bit clunky in terms of its jumping around between the past and the present, and the time skips that come after the initial attack. The action and the inner dialogue for each of the characters really help carry it through those slower parts, and the creative use of magic and its importance to the story and culture of its wielders felt very genuine and very well explored. I highly recommend this book to people who want to explore how old cultural traditions still impact our world today, and for people who want to see a warrior and a main character that is older and is also a parent. This book is also great for people who want to read fantasy but want to get out of the traditional inspirations of European cultures, and instead want to explore something a little bit more Eastern inspired. But with that, that's our review of The Sword of Kaigen, everybody. I want to thank all of you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and press the little bell icon to be notified of when future videos come out. Please comment down below what you guys liked about the book, what you hated about the book, as well as any other kind of books that you would like me to check out and possibly review on the channel, as well as what you guys would like to see in upcoming videos. But until then, I'll see you guys next time.